So good evening. Great. I know it's 6 o'clock at night, long day after work, but let's try that again. Good evening. Yeah, that's it. So listen, I deeply appreciate the turnout tonight. It's always easy to do a first night kickoff and people show up, and we did it during the day. And it's a different story at nighttime when people are working all day and they've got families and commitments. And so it means a lot that you came out tonight. Let me talk a little bit about format tonight, okay? What this will start looking like moving forward, maybe not next month, because we have a conversation going on about working out a report out from the work that the school committee's doing. But starting in January, when I'm back in town full time, we'll try to meet monthly just like this. And the committees will be in the room. Instead of committees trying to meet around this time and tying up people 2 and 3 times a month, we will always start out with a guest speaker. The guest speaker I will try to do every month that has something to make us think about, or some important issue that we ought to be aware of, or some motivational thing that makes us think about how we could do something better in town. And so we will always try to do that. I am following the playbook that we used in Rutland. I mean, that's what we did. We used to meet during the day, but there were a lot of state government officials involved. So they would come at noontime in brown bag and that type of thing. And so at some point, very shortly, after our guest speaker, which I'll talk about in a minute, I'll introduce the chairs of each committee, and they'll take you off into a classroom around the corner, one of the classrooms around the corner, for nothing more than introductions, make sure we have email addresses and phone numbers, talk a little bit about why you're interested in doing what you're doing to participate in this. If you haven't signed up for a committee and you hear the arts committee and that sounds like something you want to do, go with Clint and go sit in and listen to what they're doing. I want to remind you of a couple ground rules that I talked about, and for the folks that weren't here, the first night, the day we announced this. We say no to nobody. If you got an idea that you think is going to make the town better, as long as the idea isn't illegal, immoral, or is going to get us sued, even though I'm not sure we can be sued because we're not an entity, and I'll talk about that in a minute because that's important. The whole time I was in Rutland and we ran Project Vision, no one was ever told no. People came with ideas, and I was telling some folks the other day, one of the ideas was a guy by the name of Steve Costello, who's a vice president for Green Mountain Power, and he called me up one day and said, hey, I want to paint coffee cans with flowers on them, plant flowers and hang them by the middle school. I'm kind of looking at the phone, I hear, okay, what's that got to do with public safety, right? We didn't say no. They worked that out in one of the committees at our monthly meeting, got a bunch of volunteers together and did that. That led to what is now known as Rutland Blooms, where businesses are donating money every year. And so they put cherry trees on the west side of town coming in, and it's about making the town look better, the city in this case. So my point is, we will never say no to you. What I've said to the chairs of the committees, no is not in our dialogue. Now, we're restricted because we're not a government agency, but every idea from whoever it comes from means something, and it should be vetted and listened to, and if that person's willing to run with it, then run with it. And let's see, it's energy and synergy, and I think that's important. So we will have the meetings every month, the committees will meet, and then the committee chairs will come back and report out on where they are. So everybody hears what the other committees are doing. Because eventually, if not right off tonight, you're going to start seeing some cross-pollination between what one committee's thinking and what another committee's thinking. And I'll use one of my favorite points, which is environment matters to me. My background's in justice, my background's in criminal justice. I've been exposed to a lot of different stuff and a lot of studies. It really matters what the environment in the community is because it makes a difference. There has to be certain elements present for people to commit crimes. If you take any of those elements away, and one of them is environment, you will not have crime. It's not rocket science. So we may have somebody working on a town issue, and the Public Safety Committee over here at Alex, which we'll introduce in a minute, is working on a public safety issue. And those issues can't be separated apart. So that's the reason why the chairs will report back and everybody gets to hear what the other committees are doing. There are no trade rules. So if you're on a committee and it's like, you know what, I thought this was for me, but I want to hop over on, by all means. There is no rules. You don't have to sign up. We're not doing background investigations. We're not doing fingerprint checks. We're not doing any of that. If you want to participate, and I often tell the story, in Rutland there was a guy that was suing me in the police department, and he participated in Project Vision, and I had absolutely no problem with that because he had value and he had ideas. He was suing me, but that's a whole other story. Had value and had ideas. So that's what tonight's going to look like, and we will always be open to ideas. And if for some reason you don't feel like that's happening, someone needs to get to me and let me know that you don't feel like your idea is being heard. Any feedback on that at all? Comments? Okay, let me get right to our guest speaker, and so I'm going to try to do this the best I can. John Warner and I go way back. We've been friends for a long time, and I talk to John at least. I try my best to call him once a week to see how my friend is doing. Check in on him. But how many people were at the game on Saturday in Randolph? How many people were on the street when the team came back? Yeah. Let me tell you something. This town needed that. This town needed a soccer team that went 18-0. I know I saw Aaron come in. Where's Aaron? Raise your hand. So Aaron, if I get this number wrong, just throw something at me. Team held opponents all year long to 5 goals? 6. 18-0, only scored on them 6 times the entire season. They defeated the team that had won the state championship 4 years in a row. And so as I stood there watching that game wind down, there was something magical there. Don't know what it was. Can't put my arms on it, but it was magical. And I've watched a lot of soccer games. Yes, my granddaughter was on the team. Yes, I think Lyle's a great player. Yes. But so are a lot of the other kids on the team. And there were other kids on the team that didn't play in the game. I'm willing to bet if we asked Dan and Aaron right now, they didn't complain once. Not once. Because they saw something bigger was going on around them. And I got to tell you, I don't think it was about the 18-0 record. I don't think it was about they held teams to 6 goals. I don't think it was about that this little town of Arlington stood up when some people may be looking at this little town of Arlington as maybe we shouldn't have a school. We stood up and demonstrated something about class and character that other schools just can't do. That's what I saw on Saturday. And so this little small town and that group of young ladies had a social contract with all of us in this room. That's the way I looked at it on Saturday. And the social contract was about, we're going to go out there and we're going to play a game based on skill, poise, and following the rules. We're not going to trash talk. We represent Arlington. And that's what they went out and did. And I think it's the same social contract for me that when I was approached about coming back and working on this effort, that I thought about how do you bring the same kind of social contract to all of us. Just like those young ladies held each other accountable for what they did and what their job on the field was and what they did in practice and how hard they worked in practice to get to where they are, and they held each other accountable. I think there's a social contract there for all of us to hold each other accountable for a better place to live and bigger opportunities in town. And I don't think the girls fully understand yet what they did on Saturday. I don't think they see it that way. I think they're still a little bit shocked, right? As we, again, let me tell you something else. When we came into town, because I waited for the bus up on Wilcox Flat, when we came down through 7A, and we came around that corner by the Arlington Inn, and fireworks are going off. I've been in town since 1981. I do not remember the last time I saw that number of people on the street. With smiles on their faces, cheering, and celebrating something more than that 18-0 season. There was something more there. So I get to embarrass my wife now. At one point I looked over at her, there's a tear rolling down her cheek. She's not very emotional. And she said to me, I don't know why I'm emotional. Because I said it's something that it's deeper. If you peel the onion away, it's more than the 18-0. It's more than they just won the state championship. It's about this social contract that they had with our community and how well they represented us. This is why I asked John to come tonight. Because John Warner, as I told John Saturday night, Saturday was about him. Because John, 45 years ago, came to Arlington, Vermont. And he made a social contract with our town. And his social contract was, I'm going to develop a soccer program based upon the principles of doing it the right way. Now, my son played for John, like many people in this room played for John. And I remember, John and I were just talking about this before, I remember one year, it was a quarterfinal game here. I think it was their sophomore year. Can't remember who the team was, but it was a damn physical team. And they probably didn't play by all the rules. John could have easily coached those kids to be the same way, but he didn't, and lost. Because the loss was more important because of the principle. And so what happened on Saturday for me goes a lot deeper than 18-0, and this town needed this. This spoke to a social contract that John Warner put in place and he mentored over the years. And then I got thinking about the hundreds and hundreds of players that he coached. Hundreds and hundreds. So he coached players who are now parents, who are now grandparents, and what he instilled in them is that you play the game of life by the rules. And you do it with skill, grace, and poise. That's what those kids did on Saturday. For us that were there were times that it would have been easy to get caught up in what the game plan of the other team was, but they didn't. And so when you think about all those kids that played over the years since 1972, and then they had their kids and they instilled those values in their kids, and then they had grandkids and instilled those values in their grandkids. And Coach Wilkins and Coach Wood is an example of that. Coach Wilkins is an example because there's been a couple of times this year that I know of, and I won't go into it to embarrass them, that kids on the team didn't live up to that social contract. And what became more important is they didn't live up to the contract. That's what was instilled in Todd Wilkins by John Warner. For Aaron, first quote in the newspaper everybody picked up yesterday, it wasn't, hey, we won the championship. This was about John Warner. Interview Amy Frank, senior in high school. What does Amy say? This was about Mr. Warner. Interview Tess Belknap, a 15-year-old young lady. What does she say? It's about Mr. Warner. And so I bring this point up about John as a guest speaker tonight because John represents what we're trying to do right here. And we owe it to each other to hold each other accountable and enter into yet another social contract where we're going to work together to make Arlington better. And John is an example of that, and that's the reason why I asked John to speak tonight. John?
Give me way too much credit. But I love this town called Arlington. So I'm going to start with a question. It goes back to 1972. How does a 23-year-old kid from Long Island, right out of college, with long blonde hair, driving a VW camper with his Cocker Spaniel, a degree in chemistry, and a bag of soccer balls, end up in Arlington, Vermont? And the answer is simple. He gets lucky. I do love this town. I love its beauty, our rec park, the people. At the end of the day, it's the people. I love the spirit that Jim spoke about with the championship this year. And I just, as Jim alluded, you know, for Todd and Aaron, former star players, and Dan, Dan was a star player for me too, so we're getting generations here. And to watch them coach that team together was pretty special. And they're doing it right, and that's what's great. So Jim asked me to just very briefly share my story. and weave in a few Arlington stories, because they do take us back to where we want to be. Indeed, I got my degree in chemistry from Oneonta, even though my heart always wanted to be a teacher and a coach. I actually moved to University of Florida on a fellowship to get a PhD in chemistry. I stayed a week because it wasn't right in my heart. I came back, I wanted a job. I'd never been in the state of Vermont. I wasn't certified. I'd never taken an ed course. I just had this degree in chemistry and physics and math, and had played some college soccer. Well, I wrote a letter to towns in Vermont. I'm not even sure I knew they had a high school. Dear Principal, Arlington High, Arlington, Vermont was one of them. And Bud Town wrote back and he says, young man, I want to meet you. And I drove up, and when I came across the state line, I don't think I knew one person in the state, but I had my Cocker Spaniel and I had my camper and my long blonde hair, and there's a mental image for you. So he hired me, and in the fall of '72, here I was, teaching 16 things, coaching, and loving every minute of it. But it was a bit of a lonely year because, you know, after you're in college all those years and there's co-eds all over the place. So anyway, in the summer of '73, I went back to Oneonta to continue on my master's and take some ed courses. And two significant things happened when I came back for the second school year in the fall of '73. The first was that Herb Eddy, my predecessor as soccer coach, had moved on, and Bud said, and you, young man, are our next varsity soccer coach. Well, that was one thing. And Aaron, you don't get this yet, but I started 0-4. They'd have probably run me out of town if it was this year. But, so don't get it. I like the 18-0. Keep it rolling. And, but truthfully, we started 0-4, but people hung in with me. The other thing was I showed up fashionably late, not late, but close, for the first faculty meeting. And it was love at first sight for me, for Judy. I don't think it was reciprocal just yet. And without going into a long story, it turns out we both had gotten engaged, didn't know each other, but were engaged to college sweethearts, because I'd gone back in the summer and figured I'll bring somebody back with me the following year. And but I got close enough to Judy to, you know, there was a diamond. I said, oh shoot, this is not good. But around about November, probably on a beer or two, I said to her, I'm in love with you. And I don't know whether she'd had a glass of wine or what, but she said, I feel the same way. And in November we broke our engagements, and in February we got married. We've known each other not quite 7 months, and that'll be 44 years coming up pretty soon. That was a pretty significant year. Our son was born in '75, our daughter in '87, both valedictorians here, of whom we're, you know, so proud. And this is where we chose to send our kids to school. It's where we chose to live. And I just have to do this because there are people in this town today, there were people in this town then who looked after each other. And I know some of his grandchildren are here, but Harry Pickering Sr., if you never had the chance to get to know Pick, one of the greatest people you could ever meet. And we were trying to buy a house. It was pretty tough on about $8,000 a year salaries that we were making. I remember there was a nice farmhouse for sale on Crow Hill Road. They're asking $45,000. We offered $35,000, and thankfully they said no before we had to file for the mortgage, because they probably wouldn't have accepted it anyway. But then on a beautiful May afternoon in '76, I decided to drive down 313, one of the most beautiful valleys in the world. Just after school, it was like, you know, I'm just going to take a ride down along the river. And there was Pick's youngest boy, Dennis, hitchhiking home after school, because, you know, you did that then. And if you were a teacher, you didn't think twice about picking him up because you knew the kid and you knew his parents. So I picked him up between there and his house. I said, Dennis, your dad doesn't have any lots for sale, does he? He said, I don't know. He was 7th grader. They don't know anything. But he came back into school Monday and he said, that's his calling. And I had met Pick. We'd done a little bit together with the Boy Scouts. And so anyway, I called him and he said, John, I got a nice lot. I'm asking $10,000 for it. And if you've ever been to our place, you'd know we'd go for a lot more than that today. Story gets better. He said, if you want to build a house there, we'll build it together this summer. And I said, yeah, we do. And he said, and it's going to be tight for you. He said, so I'll take 8. He was asking 10, and he took 8. And then so Jude's dad helped us scrape together $4,000. And I didn't know where the other $4,000 was coming from. And so Pick said, well, look, I'll take a second mortgage. First year, no payments, and then some ridiculously low income or interest. And then he built cabinets that wasn't part of the deal, and all the barn board came out of his barn. And I tell you that story because, to me, Harry Pickering Sr. represents so much of the thread of what this community is about. And I miss him every day. So in 1975, about that same time, I'm bouncing around a little and I'm almost done, we started the Youth Soccer League. And, that's a whole nother talk, and I won't get into it. But and then we got more and more kids playing, and people started taking notice, like, oh, these kids in Arlington can play. And then in '80, we founded the Southwest Vermont League and got lots of towns. And people said, why are you starting soccer in other towns? I said, it's just going to make the game better. And we still beat them, so it was okay. In 1990, I had a dream to light the field. And as with almost any project in this town, of course, Mac Molding was a big supporter. And I remember John Thompson Electric donated the time to wire everything. And Wilcox Lumber helped set the posts, the telephone poles. That's still the same ones that's still there 27 years later. And the dream was that the community would come out and see the kids play. 4 o'clock was tough, but 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock games. And maybe we lost it a little recently. Well, these two fine teams, Aaron and Dan's championship team, Todd's excellent team, we had huge crowds this fall, didn't we? And there was a spirit there. And it's what this community's about. Whether we go 18-0 or not quite that good, because that is a dream season. A kid at Aaron, I said, I never had an undefeated season. So in any case, that was huge. We did that for $13,000. And I still have a scrapbook of the project. And my team, which probably included, I know it included Todd and Jay Baker and my son and others, backfilling the trenches by hand where the wires had gone. So as Jim said, we always tried to say, play the game the right way, do the right thing. You may have heard the story of this fall. I was pleased it got back to me. I wasn't surprised. But Todd got a very nice email from a stranger in West Rutland. And she had come into Subway and gotten online behind 22 ravenous boys who had just won a game. And without being told, because they'd been taught right, one of the leaders said, ma'am, come ahead of us. There's a lot of us. There's only one of you. Those are so significant. And the kids are all wearing maroon. And that's how it spreads, and makes us all so proud. So most of you know Judy and I are dealing with some issues health-wise. We're going to do okay. The motto became Linneo, losing is not an option. I want to make sure you understand that, and I'm not sure Aaron's girls do, but it wasn't a bad thing. what it means is you're not going to win every game, but if you give everything you got, you're never going to lose. And that's what our teams do all the time. And I'm happy to tell you, because it again reflects Arlington. Brandon Smith, a former player, of course, designed bumper stickers, and we put the word out on Facebook, and they're in 36 states now and 5 foreign countries. People wanted to buy them. We said no, but if you want to make a donation to the Cancer Center in honor of the nurses and doctors who look after us, that would be terrific. No set amount. You don't have to give. If you just display the sticker, that's wonderful. But I share this part with you because so many of the donations that have come in have an Arlington connection. You know, they're either former players who have moved to Alaska. We got one in Alaska. We got one in New Zealand stuck on a street sign of a kangaroo crossing. I mean, it's crazy. But so many of them are connected to Arlington and how we care about each other. And that, I know, is we've not lost it. We just need to build it back up even more. And I'm really happy to tell you that we are past $12,000 raised through that. So Judy and my decision to stay here when we could have moved on, and it was absolutely the right one. And it all comes back when you face some issues and people rally around you. At the end of the day, it's the people that make Arlington great. And if we've been a small part of that, then that's pretty significant and makes me feel pretty darn good. At one point there was a t-shirt, and I wasn't fast enough to buy it, down at the wayside, but it said Arlington, Vermont. Wasn't born here, but got here as fast as I could. And the final thing is, when somebody from some other beautiful little town in Arlington starts telling you about their covered bridge, you listen to them and then you say, in Arlington we have 2.
John Warner could have went anywhere. John Warner could have coached Division I college soccer, but he didn't. And so as we start to talk about the committees, as I said, every month we'll have a guest speaker just to get the juices flowing a little bit about what we're setting out on as a group and what this is really about. And John touched on it again. It's not about trying to remake something. It's not about we're really, discouraged about what's going on. It's time to bring that social fiber back and really start to appreciate the Harry Pickerins, the Ken Smiths, the Dick Keoghs, people that have gone before us that are, people that were that social fiber in the community. The list can go on and on, go all the way back to Norman Rockwell. The list can go on. And John is now in that category of people that have made such a contribution and is so humble about what he did that I have to remind him when I talk to him on the phone all the time, John, you're watching your legacy unfold in front of you, and not many people get to do that in life. It's pretty neat. So, enough of that sappy stuff, bud? Okay.
We both got through it, though.
Okay, we did it. We did it. So look, this is what's going to happen next. I'm going to introduce the chairs from each committee, and they're going to lead you off into, if you've signed up for a committee or you're interested in serving on that committee. They'll take you down to a classroom, going to get to know everybody on the committee, talk a little bit about why you're here. I'm asking the chairs to gather up a mailing list with some emails because we don't have a social media site yet, and I'm going to get to that when you come back afterwards, report out, because it's one of the things we need to get to tonight. We're going to spend about 25 minutes, tops, with the group for right now. The goal tonight, as I said, is to get to know each other, talk a little bit about what your interests are, why you're on that committee. And and then we'll come back in and the committee chairs are going to report out to us, okay? One of the things I will tell you is that the school committee is ahead of folks simply because of the self-study work that we've been doing with the board, right? So they've been meeting on a regular basis and working with Nicole and Bill Basic and pounding away at a self-study that hopefully we'll be able to get some information to the community pretty soon. But, so they're a little bit further ahead. As I said to the chairs, don't feel like we should be further than we are. Tonight's really the warm-up of the committees to get to know each other. So it's not like he's not knowing Todd Wilkins. Todd has agreed to chair the town government committee. So if Todd, whoever has signed up for that or has an interest, if you want to follow Todd, Todd will take you over to one of the classrooms around the corner. And if we can be back around 7, that would be good. Clint Dickens is here in the front. Clint has agreed to chair the Arts Committee. Now the Arts Committee is, somebody said to me, what about the history? Well, this is where we don't have any rules, we don't have a charter, we're not going to create any rules, we're not creating bylaws. We're just going to do whatever we need to do to make things better. So if you think, for example, you have something around history and you want to participate in that, I think arts would be a place to put it.
Also tourism too.
Right, and tourism, right. So whoever's interested in that can go with Clint to a classroom. Over here is Alex Burke. Alex, probably new to the community. How long have you been in the community, Alex?
About a little over a year now.
A little over a year. You probably could have lived anywhere you wanted to live, right?
I could have.
So Alex is a deputy state's attorney, Bennington County State's Attorney's Office. He's a prosecutor. So Alex, can't talk about it because it's a pending case, but Alex was involved in the Mrs. Jones homicide. And he's volunteered to chair the Public Safety Committee. So fire folks, rescue folks, people concerned about public safety issues such as crime, vandalism, whatever that may be, can go with Alex, okay? Hoop, where are you? Hooper's a familiar face, right? Hooper is the chair of the Recreation Committee, and if folks, we've started a conversation with the rec folks from the park, and we're having a conversation about how to better facilitate conversations around what happens at the park and where does the rest of the town fit into the work that they've done. And I would think, Dave, you would agree that those conversations have been pretty productive. I know Chris was here. Is Chris still here? We met, and Chris is the president, and I think we had a very productive conversation about how to find ways to improve. We have one of the greatest assets in the state is in that park. And how can we better do that and bring more recreation opportunities to town? So you can follow, if you're interested in that, you can follow Hooper. Right behind Hooper is Elizabeth Berger. Elizabeth, as of up until Saturday when she told me she was going to step down from the vice chair of the Economic Development Committee. But then Alan Shorn, after the reason why I buy gas at ChemClean is to keep talking Alan into doing things. So Alan and I were talking one day at the gas pump, and Alan's going to step up, as I understand, to help out with a little bit of that. We haven't talked. Maybe I volunteered you. And
Is this called putting me on the spot?
putting you on the spot. Remember what I told you? If you want me to keep buying gas there. Okay, all right. You got a deal. I'll buy gas. You volunteer. It's pretty simple. So Alan and Elizabeth are the Economic Development Group. And again, economic development, we're not trying to create something other than right away try to figure out what our assets are and how we can build on those assets from an economic development standpoint. And Josh Sherman is right here. Josh is the chair of the Education School Committee and has been leading up the work that's being done with the study group. And some of the folks in the room have been involved in that. If you're still interested, the school committee will look a little bit different after we get the self-study piece done and presented to the school board. But in the meantime, if you're interested and you have a passion, because that's where you want to put your efforts, you can follow Josh. And who am I missing? Am I missing somebody?
I think you had
1 or
6.
2? Huh? 3? What's that?
I think you had 6.
All right. So if you all want to kind of gather out in the hallway, people can follow you. If you don't feel like you're ready to do a committee yet, hang back here and you can visit with me and we can talk about what it is and what your concerns are, and I'll gather that information from you.
Story was
Okay?
amazing.
Can I get maybe, Todd, can you start with a little bit of a report out about the conversation you had in the committee on town government?
Yep.
So it's all yours, buddy.
Oh, great. So, actually, we had some fantastic conversations started. Extremely pleased with our group. I had to shut them off to come here, which was tough to do because once you get those conversations going, you certainly don't want to stop them. And I think we weren't the only group. We went over a list that we come up with to start to look into. We kind of gave ourselves some homework to go back out and come up with even more things, and then at our next meeting, we're going to try to prioritize those for the group and go to work on what some of the issues are within the town that we can help our select board with. We certainly aren't a group that's going to try to take over the select board or be the select board or anything like that, but just ways that we can help assist them and help make our town better.
Great, thank you. Clint, you want to report out for the arts group?
Some of you may not know me, my name is Clint Dickens. I am part of the Norman Rockwell Studio and Inn, and been there for 20 years. We went through 7,000 miles in 22 states before we wound up here. My daughter went to school here, and recently decided that this is where I want to be, this is where I feel inspired. And it was really a pleasure to have the committee and find out that everybody else in the committee feels a lot the same way. I feel really excited and enthused by the talent in the committees and the wisdom and the connections with the town, Mary Canfield Library, with the Bennington Museum, all the things around us that we're part of. So we're looking forward to some great projects. I think we're kind of at that place where we're kind of forming what we really are, you know, and one of my questions was art and tourism. Now I'm beginning to see art and tourism really are synonymous to this town in a lot of ways when you consider Rockwell and you consider all of our history here. The people that have been here, the 5 artists, the Green Mountain Boys, we've kind of talking about it being art and history committee because that is so affected by tourism. And one of the things, a final point that I think was really important for me to hear was, you know, it's not about, we hear this, make Arlington better and people, that's great now, and I don't think that's a contention. I think one of the committee members said, this is about the vision. This is about what we see Arlington becoming and having some direction and having some ability with I'm just so impressed, I don't know about you guys, but I'm really impressed with Jim Baker and just his desire to be a part of this and how long he's been a part of the committee. And all the other committee chairmen, I feel honored to be a part of that, and I'm really excited about some of the ideas that we have. And we too, Todd, we just kept going. And if you hadn't noticed, I tend to be a little talkative. So anyway, thank you all very much, and I look forward to working with you.
Alex, you want to come up?
So we had a very interesting conversation on our public safety meeting. We're still trying to work out exactly which direction we want to go, because as we've discussed in the committee, there's basically 3 parts of public safety historically. You have police or crime, fire and rescue, and the interactions between the 2, or 3, excuse me. The brightest point for me probably is how great we communicate as organizations with each other. Fire and rescue communicate great together. They work well together when they have to be called out and whatnot. So that's probably the biggest high point that I'd see going forward. And what's great is having members from both organizations in the committees to see how we're going to approach. Probably our biggest concern on the committee is resource allocation within the town, and not just money, but people, and the lack of new people coming into the organization. So we're not sure if we're going to be focusing on improving that aspect of it or focusing more on specific public safety issues that are currently within the town. But our goal is to identify what our public safety issues are within those 3 different fields and look at how we can work to improve it either as a group or individually within the specific organizations, and hopefully come up with some good ideas to address those issues. So we're a work in progress, but we are making work, and it's great to have people who are passionate about the different organizations, because as it's been a theme across this committee and this effort, it's the people within Arlington that make it great. The connections between people that make wonderful things happen. So we have that to build upon, and we're going to continue to do that.
Could I interject
Sure.
one thing there? If anyone is interested in learning more about the rescue squad, Marty Arian is going to be at the library tomorrow evening at 6:30 to talk about the squad. So if you're interested, stop in.
Excellent. So those bring up a great point, because this is the kind of thing, too, we'll do every meeting, is like announcements, right? What's going on in town? And, just, hey, this is going on, and you may want to think about that, so thanks for sharing that. Josh?
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Sherman. So the school committee, the education committee, is a little bit different, as Jim mentioned earlier. We held a community-wide meeting back in July, and we did a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to our school. At that time, a smaller committee was formed, really focusing as a self-study committee to try and figure out what Arlington School District and the BBSU's best options were. The Arlington School Board, of course, is still the determining factor in the overseeing governance, but we were really asked as community members to sort of get involved and figure out how we could best, based on community input, how we could best advise our school board and our community. So when we met, we really looked at state governance. We looked at, studied hard Act 46 and Act 77, which is the Act 77 is pathways, really trying to focus on how to give our youth vision and focus and the future and opportunities, and creating sort of designated learning opportunities. Act 46 is really much more looking at efficiencies among the school system, and as a committee we first looked at the 3x1 proposal, which was sort of an immediate need to review. We've looked at other supervisory unions and what they're doing, and we'll be presenting our proposal to the school board later in November. But just wanted to let you know that at every committee meeting we welcome community members. We post our minutes on the BBSU website, and we also put out on the BBSU website when our next meeting is. So you are welcome to attend. This next month will be a very boring group of meetings if you join, only because we'll be really tightening up sort of our proposal. But we always welcome feedback. One of the constant responses that we have received is that people in the community want more opportunities for their children, and they want the youth of Arlington to feel a sense of hope and optimism, and we're trying to put together something that will lead in that direction. So feel free to reach out to me or any of the other community members if you have any other questions. As Florence Belknap, who's been my sort of vice chair, secretary, co-chair, I don't know, on the committee, we never came up with titles. As she pointed out, the education committee will be changing. We were really a self-study group, very much with a focus on coming together towards giving the school board our recommendations for best options. After December or so, we will really be forming sort of a new committee with different community member involvement. So the next month may not be a particularly interesting time to attend meetings, but after that, I think that I'm hoping that everyone in this room will want to get involved. So anyways, very nice to meet you all, and thanks so much.
Thanks, Josh. That committee's done a lot of work. I think Nicole Wallens been to the meetings, and they've done a lot of work, and we're appreciative of that. Who's next now? Hoop. Where's Hoop? Come on down, Hoop.
So the Rec Park Committee, we were sort of staffed with opportunities for the community members at the Rec Park. We actually had some meetings with the actual park committee. And in the meeting today, I think a couple things came out. I think first and foremost is trying to, in many ways, convey to the town how the park works. As far as, even for me as someone new on the committee, but that has been here, I guess there was some confusion as to who the park is, okay? I think the first goal of the committee is to sort of work on communication and outreach and find out what groups are involved with the rec park, who's working with the rec park, and how we can maximize opportunities at the rec park. I'll just say I've met, I think, in 3 different instances, and each time it's amazing how many different opportunities people come up with for people in the community at the rec park. I think a couple things too, and we're going to be looking for other input too, is one of the big community sort of things we talked about today though is opportunities for people rec-wise outside the rec park. Is there town lands, other buildings in town, other places where we can take advantage of opportunities for people, whether it's on the back road or places for hiking, mountain biking, etc. So I think for anyone who may not be on the committee, but if you have any input, we'd welcome any of that input as we move forward. All right?
Oh boy. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Hoop. Is Elizabeth still here? Yeah, Elizabeth. Alan? Oh, wait a minute. So I'm buying gas and now he's going to report out?
Rock, paper, scissors.
Wow. Man, Elizabeth moves fast.
This is what I get for coming to an informational meeting. I'm honored that you're considering letting me help out and whatnot. At this stage of our development within the Economic and Commerce Committee, I'd like to include commerce because I think there's a lot of local businesses and activities that could be included that with the tourism and with people. But I think right now we have more questions than we have answers to report to you. One of the first questions that came up is what is economic development and what does it mean in relation to Arlington, and specifically what does it mean in relation to this overall initiative. There was a little bit of talk at our first meeting about how to attract businesses or entities to the area, and we kind of came around the circle and said let's identify what activities we have going on within our community and then build on that to attract people or businesses. In driving around town the day after we had our initial meeting, I just started jotting down what businesses and what shingles I saw hanging out and whatnot, and came up with about 140 different business activities. Now it could be a contractor that does electrical work that's not necessarily visible. It could be somebody that does construction work, a mason, somebody that works out of their home, home-based child care, cleaning services, and that kind of thing. And I was really kind of taken by the amount of business activity or commerce that's currently here that kind of goes unnoticed or undetected. Amy from the West Mountain Inn took that list and then did a search on the Secretary of State website and came up with about 600 or 700 different LLCs and registered businesses in the area. So that's a tremendous amount of activity that's going on that's kind of not being observed. And we think that there's some strength to be built in creating an awareness, a networking opportunity, making people aware of what other activities or what other skills exist. We also talked a little bit, one of the resources that we used was an old Arlington Chamber of Commerce brochure. And as you well know, the Arlington Chamber no longer exists. It was consumed by Manchester and the Mountain Chamber of Commerce, which unfortunately doesn't exist either through a very close vote. So in creating our networking opportunities, we want to be careful that we don't recreate a Chamber of Commerce that's destined to fail, but still think that there's a lot of opportunity in creating a network and supporting each other at a business level. So that's kind of where we're at, in just an identification mode of what's out there. And it would also be unfortunate if we're going to look at attracting business to the area that we overlook an existing business that's already here that we're unaware of, and so we bring in another business, and now these people are kind of like, hey, well, I've been here, I'm established, what are we doing? So I think just identifying what we've got, building on that strength of networking between business entities and resources, and then moving from there with guidance from the public and the overall structure of the initiative. I also had another thought about the overall process that's going on here from the initial meeting on that September Friday. And that is, we don't all engage in the same printed media. We don't all read the same banner, news guide, journal, whatever. We don't all embrace the same technologies. And I think a lot of the success with this initiative and within the committees is going to be developing an excitement and an enthusiasm and really relying on some good old-fashioned neighbor-to-neighbor, over-the-fence conversation and spreading that excitement and that enthusiasm. So I think that's one of the things that we'd like to do as well. Okay? Thanks.
All right, buddy, thank you. Thank you. I didn't miss anybody, right? I'm getting tired now. I didn't miss anybody, did I? No, I didn't think so. So that's sort of what we'll look like every month, right? And as we go on, hopefully the committees start drilling down, because some of the stuff is rather meaty, as Alex said. The Public Safety Committee is an example. And, what are you going to focus on? And it's from where I stand in my role as kind of the facilitator coordinator. Unless people are completely left to center, I'm going to let the committees decide where they're going to go. And we'll talk. I'll always be talking to the chairs offline, but it's really a citizen-driven. And Alan just hit it on the head. Did you say 160 LLCs?
No, 600 or 700.
100. But you counted like 100 and how many shingles
Just
are?
driving around like 146.
See, this goes to speak to we haven't embraced that, right? We haven't figured out a way to do that. Folks are slugging it out on their own, right? And how do you embrace it? If you saw in the paper, Pownell's actually starting a group of like that, where they're starting to network around what they do and starting to build that kind of network. So great stuff, good report, Alex, I appreciate it. So we can start wrapping up. Let me announce this, because Josh talked about this. We did a SWOT analysis back in July on the school. We were in a situation where this idea was coming to bear fruit, but the Act 46, 49 thing was kind of pushing the school piece along. So we had to quickly put together a work group. We tried to do the best we could representing the town in various walks, having teachers and citizens and parents represented. And we did this SWOT analysis. And I think that SWOT analysis was very helpful. And so look for, and I chatted with Todd before the meeting, look for sometime towards the end of January, the beginning of February, we're going to do a SWOT analysis of the entire town. To identify the assets that are in the town. This goes to what Alan said. What do we have for assets and how do we build on it? What's our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And, again, I have ideas about what that is. And so we'll be doing that towards the end of January, going into February. It's gonna take me a couple weeks to get resettled when I get back from DC, and as I was kidding earlier, it'll take me that long to get the dog out of bed so I can sleep in my own bed at home, because he thinks that that's his bed now that I haven't been home in a while. Look for that, and I'll be facilitating that like we did. That was a very powerful exercise for the folks that were there. Now, what that will look like here, I think will be a core group of people sitting around a table, but anybody that wants to participate will participate. It gets a little unruly if there's 60, 70 people in the room and you're trying to honor everybody's opinions and thoughts. But we'll figure that out and try not to say no to anybody, because that's our mantra, right? We don't say no to anybody about any idea. But that's going to be a big piece to start building on every one of these committees about what strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats we have in town. I need desperately, and I had a couple folks at the break talk to me. The next big thing we need to do, and this goes to what Alan said, I'm not a social media guy. I don't have a Facebook account. If anybody hasn't noticed, you won't find me on Facebook. I do have a Twitter account, but I'm a stalker. I stalk people because of the work I do. I follow a lot of people on the national and international level because that's what I do for work. But we need to get a social media presence in town, whatever that may look like. And it could start as something as simple as a Facebook page, where we can all communicate and people know what time the meetings are. We struggle to get the information out as simple as a meeting. A couple folks came in and thought the meeting was at 7, and that's an example of where it is. So, if anybody's interested in volunteering, I'll be hanging around for a few minutes. Clint, I know you agreed to. You agreed to, right? And so, your husband's kind of looking at you like, did you really do that?
Jim, can I just add?
Yeah.
If any of you have kids who are on their phones all the time and are really good at Facebook and social media and Twitter, we'd love to get the kids involved in this. So, once again, from the school committee, one of the things that we're trying to do is engage our kids in the community, and this would be a great way of making them feel involved.
Okay.
So, take it home and think about it.
And not doing it in stovepipes. We all know, all of us who have kids in the school know that Melissa does an incredible job with Tim, getting information out every week so you know what's going on in the school. But we need to figure out a way to make that happen in the community. And it goes to what Alan said. I mean, that number of businesses that we didn't even know about, I would have never guessed. I've been in this town since 1981. I would have never guessed that, not in a million years. So people will come up and see me afterwards. Yes. Yes.
Great. One thing too, if people are interested, I've been getting emails for years from Melissa Smith.
Yeah.
She sends them out to school. For sporting events, for example, my mother wanted to know when games are. Any of you that are interested, you can call the school, talk to Melissa, and get on that list. You can get on that community list. It's real simple. Now, you're going to get every email about what's going on in the school.
Somebody won the spelling bee contest, but it's all good.
You're
It's
going
good
to get all
stuff.
that information, so if you're interested, you can get in touch with the school.
Thanks, John.
And pursue it.
Fisher School is where you're going to get a hold of her most often.
Yeah,
For that information, so you can call me Fisher.
Okay. Perfect. But whoever's interested, if I can just grab you for a couple minutes after, and we'll talk quickly about a phone call where we start putting. I think the first step is getting a Facebook up and running.
Since there are a lot
David.
of people that still are not into computers, technology, is there a community board somewhere in town that could be used as a central posting?
Mm-hmm. Is there? I don't know.
At the school.
Huh?
Here.
Here?
We have a community board at PhD too.
Do you have a community board?
Library.
All right.
Wayside has a,
So here's what I think we need to do there, right? We need to, we have to do an inventory of that, right? Where do you put messages out when you put them out? Going back to Dave's point, not everybody is social media savvy. I've resisted as long as I can. Yes, Alan?
And let's not underestimate the power of our voice. So that if you see something on Facebook and you know that somebody's not on Facebook, say, hey, did you know the meeting's coming up on
Right.
such and such?
Exactly.
And talk to your neighbors.
Right. Or go out to the round table at the store, right?
that's right.
Lynn?
I think another source for communication is the Front Porch Forum. I think there are a lot of the particularly newer people and younger people in the area join Front Porch Forum, and it's a good way to reach people, as well as using the Vermont News Guide.
Okay. So that's to me, is a big goal between now and January, is get a social media presence and find out better ways to get information out to the community, okay? I'm gonna kind of hold this off, but I want you to, I talked about the SWOT analysis, talked about social media. You know, right now, you probably saw on your agenda, Arlington Area Renewal Project. 2 points I want to make about this. Our friends from Sandgate, Allen, and our friends from Sunderland are more than welcome to join us. So spread that word, right? This was never meant to be just an Arlington-centric, you know, operation. We consider them our neighbors, and we consider them facing some of the same questions and challenges and ideas that we face, and so we welcome their input. So if you know folks that live there, please ask them to start participating in the meetings. Project name. You know, right now we're calling it the Arlington Area Renewal Project. That's not what I end up seeing this. This could take a whole night to debate what we think a project name should be. I think there's a lot of value. You've heard me tell the story about Project Vision and how that came to be. It was a 2.5-minute conversation at about 11:45 at night. We were getting ready to push the button on a federal grant, and we realized we didn't name the grant. So myself, the gal that was doing the grant writing for us, Corinne Rodrigue, and Scott Tucker, who was the commander of the police department at the time, I don't even know how we came up with it. And so we said, yeah, Project Vision, that's good. Put it on there, push the button, we need to get out of here. That's stuck. It's marketing. So I'm not, you know, I'm not that clever with these kind of things. So I think I want you to be thinking about it, and very shortly in the new year, I think we need to brand what we're doing. Now I will tell you that it was almost 10 months into what we were doing in Rutland before we had a name, right? And so, but I think if we're going to get traction and get credibility with folks we need to get credibility with, we need to have some type of project or whatever. We talked a little bit about 2020, and everybody does Vision 2020, right? I mean, because you can either mean the year 2020 or Vision 2020. So again, we're open to anything, but be thinking about it. And maybe we put together a little working group to hash that out, but be thinking about that. And then the last thing that we'll do at every meeting is, does anybody have announcements? Kate, I know you have one.
Yes.
I'm gonna call you out, Kate Bryan.
Please do. Kate Bryan, town resident and Senior Director of Development at Battingville Valley Health Center. I'm thinking of asking all of you, as our community, to join me in a community food drive. What I'd like to do is work with the Arlington Food Shelf, my father and my mother and Jack Gunther and a bunch of others, take care of the families in our town, and we'll be offering Thanksgiving meals shortly in the coming weeks. I've spoken briefly, because this idea has just kind of come to fruit with Jim and I the last 24 hours. And so, not wanting to step on toes of other organizations of things that are going on, but I reached out to the local elementary schools. I have contacts now at the Federated Church for the summer lunch program, and hopefully getting some food in the backpacks of those kids over Christmas break and February break, and coming up with the needs of the food shelf as well as the school. And so I'll be formulating that, and our hope is to do a drive the week of December 11th so that we can really have it for the holidays, for Christmas, and then for those vacation breaks. So more information to follow, but I'd love to get all the organizations, and I challenge all of us to participate. So we'll have something fun down the pike with that plan, so thank you.
So what Kate and I talked about is, when I was in Rutland, they have this thing, you hear it right now, it's Stuff the Bus. It's a transit bus that they park downtown, and over a period of like 2 days, they just load the bus up with food and goes to the food shelf. And the police department used to guard it at night, and it was just a neat thing to watch. So I probably shouldn't say this because the rescue squad people are here, we haven't asked them this yet, but I'd love to do something like park an ambulance in front of Katie's health center, and we'll call it Pack the Back. And we'll load that thing up with food, And again, I think it's, as Kate and I talked about, on the heels of what happened Saturday, we need another good hit. We need another, people feel good about it. And nothing's better than when you give of yourself and you're giving to someone. Now, we may tie an ambulance up, I don't know, but we gotta talk to you guys. Just give us an old ambulance, something that's got lights on it, Marty, all right? So it makes a big splash in front of Katie's building. But we do it for a short period of time, because then what's gonna happen is people will come out and they're gonna interact and they're gonna talk, and synergy and energy's gonna build. Yes?
Hi, I'm Celine Scope. I'm on the squad with you guys down here, but also I'm on the board of Meals on Wheels for Arlington County. Do 50,000 meals a year. So, yeah, we should talk because, you know, identifying the homebound and the disabled
Right.
folks that can't get out.
Right.
I mean, I think all of us might know someone in the community who, you know, can't get out to get a meal. So maybe there's some way, you know, if you can identify, call me or call Katie to get meals to the, we'll do it together. You know.
So more to follow on this, right? If we don't, if nothing else, if we get 30, 40 bags of groceries, it's better than, you know, and again, Bill Bryant, his wife, and, you know, Mr. Gunther have been doing this for a long time. They toil with this up in East Arlington, and it serves a lot of folks that have needs. And it speaks again to the social fiber in our community, the social contract we have to take care of one another. So, another announcement.
Can I just add,
Sure.
piggyback on that? The inns between here and Dorset do holiday inn tours the first 2 Saturdays from noon to 4, and all of the proceeds from the ticket sales get split between the Arlington Food Shelf and the Manchester Food
Great.
Shelf. So that's a way for us to get that money to the food shelves right before Christmas. So if you have people that are coming to visit and need something to do on a Saturday, it's a great way for us to give back to the community. And the only cost that we take out of that is printing the map for people to go around. Everything else goes to the 2 food shops.
Other announcements? Not bad, I was only 10 minutes over on the agenda. Okay? Not you, you don't get a question. Or a comment, huh? Okay. Yes, yes, my lovely wife.
I think it would be nice to get the kids involved with this.
Absolutely.
In the community. It would give them volunteer hours, but it's also getting them to have some responsibility for their community.
And the Boy Scouts. Right.
For the food drive, the high school's already involved with, yep, so the student council's doing something and it runs the same period, so.
She's already called, you called Sunderland too, right?
Yes.
So we would get the schools, and any business folks that's in the room, hop on, it, right? The more the merrier. So any other announcements and stuff going on? December's meeting is a little up in the air. We have to sort out with the school, self-study group, Nicole's board. I think we just need to work out with them. That will be focused on reporting out from, I mean, they're delivering the report to the board. It's really the board's report at that point. We just need to talk a little bit about how we maybe could do a public hearing that takes the place of our meeting. But what I'd like to be able to think about doing, and we'll get this out, a notice out, but at the same time, maybe do a little bit of a cookie swap or something for the holidays, right? Just a reason to talk amongst each other when you're here and build those relationships we need to build as we move into 2018 with the focus on really doing something very special here, much like our young ladies did on Saturday in Randolph, okay? There's no other comments. I have a 5:45 flight in America to DC. If anybody's bored and they thought they'd want to give up and give me a ride to the airport, by all means. If not, I'm going home to go to bed. So, thank you.
Thank you.